So you're thinking about buying your first place in Minnesota, but you're like, how long is this going to take? In this video, I'm going to walk you through the timeline of buying a house. How long does it take start to finish? Let's go. So before you can start looking at homes, you're going to need to get pre-approved by a lender, unless of course you're paying in cash, but for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that you are using financing. And obviously, before you start looking at homes, it's pretty essential to know what you can actually afford. And with that mortgage pre-approval, it gives you a very clear idea of what your budget looks like. And how this works is basically you choose a lender and you submit to them W-2s, bank statements, tax returns. They're going to do a credit check on you, and from there the lender is going to assess your credit score, your debt to income ratio, and they will dig a little bit into your financial history as well. And then once you are pre-approved, you'll receive an official letter from your lender, and on that letter it will have your maximum loan amount and as well as the interest rate that you can expect to be paying on top of that. That pre-approval will also have your interest rate listed on there. Now this process can vary on how long it takes. Technically, depending on the lender, pre-approval could be written up in as little as like maybe an hour or less, if not even quicker than that. But I think that would be more of like a very soft pre-approval. To receive maybe a more thorough and very accurate pre-approval, you can expect a couple days, maybe a week, depending on the lender again. And a couple factors that might kind of delay that process to make it take a little longer would be if you're self-employed, you may need to provide a bit more documentation as far as your income goes, as well as maybe they find some credit issues that could take a bit of time to resolve in order to get that pre-approval. And so for the sake of this video and just to be safe, we will say that getting your pre-approval will take around a day. And now once you're pre-approved, you can begin the house hunting. And this might be the part of the process that can for sure vary the most. Some people can be on the home search for a week and then find themselves to be under contract. Some people might look for a month. Some people might look for 3 months. Some people might look for 2 years. And I think a lot of that is just because there are so many factors to take into account and so many different situations that people might be in. The time spent house hunting can depend on the market. It could depend on your preferences. Not everyone is looking for the same thing or has the same requirements in their home. But also if your budget is kind of floating around that median home price, especially here in Minnesota, you can find yourself with a lot more competition, which in turn can definitely make your home search process be a little bit more difficult. And of course, just the general availability of homes can really determine the length of your process. In a competitive market, homes are selling really quick and there's a bunch of homes on the market, but a lot of these homes are going within days, which can just make it harder for you to actually get an offer accepted and get something under contract. I think this part really depends a lot on you as the buyer. Some people look at 5 homes, some people look at 100 homes. A lot of that falls on your motivation to buy, what you're looking for, and even just like how much time you have to buy. If you're crunched on a timeline, if you're like, hey, we need to get something, we need to make something happen right now, then there's a really good chance it's not going to take you 3 months to get a house under contract. I think as a buyer, some things you can do to minimize this window of time, especially if you're very motivated, would be things like definitely understanding the market and knowing that, hey, if everything in my price range at $350 is going for above a list price, well then maybe you need to reconsider your strategy, reconsider the types of houses you're looking at, because if all you can do is $350 but all these houses keep going for more than that, well then you're just kicking the can down the road. You're not going to get into a house as soon as maybe you need to be. So if I had to choose, I mean, house hunting really can vary. I would say most common would be like 1 to 3 months, maybe leaning more towards the 1 month mark. I mean, if you're in a position where you've been thinking about buying, maybe it's like late winter and you've met with a realtor, you kind of got a soft pre-approval going, and once the springtime hits, you're really going to start your search. If you're motivated enough, I don't think there's any reason you couldn't find something in around 2 weeks. Okay, so once you have done your home searching, you have found the right house, and now you've decided that you want to put in an offer on the home. So step number 3 in this process we'll call making an offer and negotiating, which I would say typically is around 1 to 5 days. So once you find that right home, you'll submit an offer with your agent to the seller. The seller will look that offer over and they can either accept, decline, or send back a counter offer. I've definitely had situations where I've sent off an offer for buyers and we found out in as little as 2 hours that, hey, yes, your offer's been accepted. Like, we're under contract now. I've also had situations where we've been one of 7 offers that get sent in and they say, hey, you might not hear back for 24, 48 hours from now. So that can vary the timeline a little bit, as well as if they come back with a counter offer. Sometimes negotiating can, you can go back and forth quite a few times, and that can definitely add some delays or just more time to this end of the process. So I think 5 days would be kind of a super long time to have submitted an offer and go back and forth on counters that many times. But typically within 24 hours or so, you should know from the seller, like, hey, yes, no, or how about these terms instead? And then once both sides of the party are happy, you and the seller have both agreed on terms that work for you, and the purchase agreement has been signed by everyone and it's fully executed, then the next part of the process would be the home inspection. Assuming that you are getting a home inspection, which 99.9% of the time I think is something that should be done. But as the buyer, it's totally up to you how you want to go about that. But for the sake of this video, again, we're going to assume that you are getting an inspection on the home. And typically the home inspection period can be anywhere between 5 to 10 days. So we'll go with 7 days for the inspection period as a safe bet. This part of the process is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you, with the help of your agent, will schedule a licensed inspector to come out and do a full inspection on the house. They will send you an inspection report. From there, you will have the opportunity to go through that report, see if there are any things that you would like to reach out and try and negotiate with the seller to have them fix. But typically that's for more major ticket items, big things like that. It's important to not look at the inspection report as a giant checklist to just send to the seller and say, hey, here's everything wrong, we need you to fix all this stuff. Because if you do, there's a good chance the seller's going to say, no, I'm not going to fix all that. You offered on the house that you went and you saw, and while maybe you didn't get a chance to look under the hood with an inspector, you still did have the opportunity to go through the house and see it, and you were making your offer based on what you saw in the home. So that's why it's important to have a good agent with you who can say, like, hey, I know you guys really like this home and you want to offer $350 on it, but here are some things that may come up in the inspection, and maybe you want to be proactive and offer with a price based on the actual condition of the home. However, there are things like structural, HVAC, electrical, quite a few things that you admittedly can't really see, can't find out just in a showing. So that mostly applies to like cosmetic things. Also, when it does come to negotiating these home inspection items, you can ask for specific things, or you can also just request a credit at closing from the seller in order to maybe fix some things that did show up in the inspection. I think sometimes this can be maybe like a softer blow to the seller. Instead of sending them something that's like a punch list, just say, hey, based on our findings in the inspection, we'd like a $2,000 credit at closing to fix a bunch of things or whatever. And so once you are through the home inspection, the next part of the process would be the mortgage approval and underwriting. This is a lot of the heavy lifting on the lender and the title company. This process can typically take 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 2 if your lender is really cooking and moving, but 3 to 4 weeks is definitely a safe bet. And what happens during this mortgage approval and underwriting process is basically your lender is verifying all the financial documents to approve your mortgage. This is for sure the most paperwork heavy part of the entire process. And as a buyer, it's very important for you to be responding very quickly to document requests you may get from your lender. Maybe they need bank statements or whatever it may be. It's very important to stay on top of that and make sure you are sending that stuff to them as soon as they ask for it, for the sake of not delaying anything. Obviously, during this period, I'm sure you've heard this, but you're going to want to avoid major financial changes. So once you're under contract, do not go out and buy a brand new truck. Don't spend a bunch of money on a vacation. Don't start racking up your credit cards. You're going to want to make sure your financial situation kind of remains as consistent as it can through that period. And a lot of that is to ensure that your debt to income ratio stays consistent. That's a huge part of what the lenders are looking at when they're looking over your financial situation overall. Also during this period is when the lender is going to have an appraiser come out and appraise the home. Basically what the appraisal does is it confirms the home's market value, or to put it another way, it makes sure that the home is worth what you're buying for so that the bank isn't overpaying for something. And then once you're through the mortgage approval and underwriting, you're moving into the closing process, which is definitely like the home stretch of the transaction. So once your final loan has been approved, you will get what's called a CD, or a closing disclosure, which will have the final loan terms, the monthly payments, and the closing costs you can expect to pay on closing day. You will receive this at least 3 days prior to your closing. And what you will do with that closing disclosure is review and sign the final documents. You'll have the information to know how much money to bring in regard to down payment and closing costs, which is important to know if you didn't wire your funds and you are bringing a cashier's check to closing. And the actual closing can take anywhere from like 1 to 2 hours, but once that's done, you're handed the keys to your home and you're on your way. So based on all those things, how long is the overall timeline from start to finish? I think in the fastest scenario with financing, you're looking at 30 days. But in order for that to happen, you'd need a very strong pre-approval, a quick home search. You'd need to put up a very competitive offer and have a very smooth underwriting process from there. I think a more average timeline, a more safe timeline would be somewhere in the 45, maybe to 60 day range. This is kind of like a more typical timeline, taking into consideration some minor negotiations and maybe a couple delays along the way. But some other factors that could impact your timeline, if you are a cash buyer, you could probably close in somewhere as little as 2 to 3 weeks, since there is no loan underwriting process to go through. And again, if you're in a very competitive market, it can make buying a little bit more difficult, can make you have to maybe rethink your strategy and shift a little bit in order to get that offer accepted. And so that's all I have for this video. Appreciate you. See you on the next one.